For more than half a century, Barbra Streisand has controlled her image with near-surgical precision. She built a career on discipline, privacy, and emotional self-containment, rarely letting the public see anything she didn't intend them to see. So when she finally found lasting love in her 50s, many assumed the story had reached its peaceful conclusion. But the truth is far more complicated. Behind the quiet smiles and long marriage lies a relationship that doesn't just break Hollywood rules, it quietly rewrites what intimacy, control, and survival really look like. The woman who never planned to need anyone. Long before James Brolin entered her life, Barbra Streisand had already lived several emotional lifetimes. By the time she reached her 40s, she was not just famous, she was untouchable. Her voice, her face, her authority in Hollywood were unmatched, but her personal life told a very different story. Love, for Barbra, had always been intense, consuming, and ultimately destabilizing. It arrived fast, burned hot, and left emotional damage behind. Her first marriage to actor Elliot Gould began when they were both young and ambitious, rising together as a glamorous cultural force. On the surface, they looked like the ideal artistic couple, but behind closed doors, imbalance crept in quickly. As Barbra's fame exploded, Elliot struggled with being reduced to an accessory in her orbit. The press labeled him Mr. Streisand, and that nickname carried a quiet humiliation that never fully faded. Their marriage deteriorated under the weight of public scrutiny, mismatched power, and emotional exhaustion. By the time they divorced, Barbra had learned a painful lesson. Love could cost her freedom. What followed was a long series of relationships that reinforced that belief. Powerful men, creative men, charismatic men. Each relationship carried its own promise, but none offered emotional safety. With John Peters, love became volatile and controlling, blending professional success with personal instability. With Richard Baskin, affection was supportive yet disposable, ending abruptly when something new caught her attention. With Don Johnson and others, passion appeared briefly, then vanished just as quickly. Even when romance felt genuine, permanence never followed. Over time, Barbra stopped expecting it to. She openly admitted that marriage no longer seemed realistic for her. Independence became her shield. Solitude became something she learned to accept, even enjoy. By the time she reached her early 50s, she had quietly made peace with the idea that romantic fulfillment might simply be over. Not tragic, just finished. That emotional position matters, because it explains why what happened next was so unexpected, and why it would eventually become so strange. When James Brolin appeared, Barbra was not searching for love, repair, or redemption. She was closed, guarded, unavailable by design. And yet, within weeks, something shifted in a way she hadn't allowed herself to experience in decades. This wasn't the beginning of a fairy tale, it was the beginning of a surrender she never planned to make. The blind date that shouldn't have happened. When Barbra Streisand agreed to attend a dinner party in the summer of 1996, she never expected it to matter. She almost didn't go. The blind date had been arranged by the ex-wife of her former live-in boyfriend, John Peters, an awkward setup that made her seriously consider skipping the night altogether. At 54, Barbra was emotionally guarded and protective of her solitude. Romance felt risky, especially under social pressure. When she arrived and realized James Brolin would be there, her instincts took over. Instead of joining the adults, she hid downstairs with the children, playing games and avoiding him as long as possible. It wasn't diva behavior, it was fear. James arrived unguarded. Recently divorced and deliberately celibate, he wasn't chasing drama or conquest. When Barbra finally sat at the table, the moment wasn't cinematic. There was no spark, no tension. There was disappointment. She had imagined a rugged, bearded mountain man. Instead, she saw a clean-shaven man with cropped hair. Without filtering herself, she touched his head and bluntly asked who had ruined his hair. The comment was sharp and inappropriate, but honest. That honesty changed everything. James later said that moment made him fall in love, not because it was kind, but because it was real. Barbra wasn't performing or managing an image, she was simply telling the truth. For someone tired of Hollywood surfaces, it landed deeply. Barbra didn't fall in love that night. She didn't even feel safe. But James didn't trigger her usual alarms. He wasn't intimidated by her fame, didn't compete or try to control her. He listened. They went on a date, then another. On July 1st, their first official outing ended not with a kiss, but with hours of conversation that stretched until 3 in the morning. That mattered more to Barbra than any physical gesture. It meant she wasn't being rushed. Weeks later, James left for Ireland to direct a film. Instead of fading, the connection intensified. They talked constantly. Barbra later admitted she once fell asleep on her bathroom floor with the phone pressed to her ear. It wasn't obsession. It was attachment forming somewhere unfamiliar. At the same time, Barbra was consumed by directing and editing her own film. She later admitted she couldn't have met James earlier in life. She wouldn't have been open. Only when she retreated into privacy did the relationship grow. A wedding built on secrecy, not celebration. When Barbra Streisand and James Brolin decided to marry, it felt almost unreal, especially to Barbra. Just a few years earlier, she had publicly accepted that she would likely never marry again. Independence had become her emotional default, and commitment still felt risky. Yet she stepped into another lifelong bond, this time entirely on her own terms. The wedding was set for July 1st, exactly 2 years after their first date. The symmetry mattered to James. Control mattered to Barbra. There would be no cathedral, no spectacle, no press. They married at her Malibu home, a space she could fully command. Invitations weren't mailed. Guests were contacted discreetly by phone. Every detail was governed by confidentiality, security, and strict boundaries. This wasn't just about avoiding paparazzi. It was about containment. Barbra oversaw the preparations personally, favoring subdued elegance over excess. An ivory tent rose on her ocean view lawn, turning her home into a sealed environment where nothing unexpected could enter. Flowers were arranged with precision, roses lined staircases, candles floated in the pool. Even sound was controlled. To block reporters from hearing their vows, loud music played outside the tent, jungle noises, heavy rock, anything to drown out private words. Windows were screened to stop cameras. Barbra knew privacy wasn't passive. It had to be enforced. Inside, the ceremony was intimate, yet guarded. The guest list was small but famous. When Barbra sang love songs to James, it wasn't a performance. It was vulnerability carefully rationed. James, by contrast, was openly emotional. In his speech, he spoke simply about feeling lucky to find love so late in life, admitting he didn't want to sleep because every moment with her mattered. The press saw almost nothing. What details emerged came only from guests afterward. That invisibility was deliberate. Barbra wanted her marriage sealed off before it could become public property. But secrecy has consequences. By building a marriage almost entirely behind closed doors, intimacy and isolation became intertwined. The same walls that kept the world out also kept the relationship in. Public appearances faded. Ordinary spaces were replaced with private ones. When privacy turned into isolation. After the wedding, Barbra Streisand and James Brolin didn't return to public life like most Hollywood couples. There were no premieres or shared interviews, no visible honeymoon phase. Instead, they quietly withdrew. Date nights were chosen to avoid attention. Popular restaurants were off limits. James later admitted they went where no one cared, simply to avoid being followed. Paparazzi weren't an annoyance, but a threat. Gradually, even ordinary public spaces disappeared from their lives. The world outside their home shrank, while the world inside it grew. That growth took unusual forms. Inside their Malibu estate, Barbra created a private underground shopping street, a fully realized indoor mall displaying vintage clothes, antiques, dolls, and memorabilia. To some it seemed whimsical, to others excessive. For Barbra, it served a clear purpose. She could browse, choose, and control without leaving safety. Guests were invited only selectively. The space wasn't communal. It was curated intimacy, a private universe without intrusion. The same pattern appeared elsewhere. They chose not to have children together, focusing instead on companionship and ritual. Their bond turned inward. Daily routines replaced outside connections, and even grief stayed contained within the marriage. When Barbra's longtime dog died, she couldn't accept the finality of loss. She cloned the dog twice, creating two genetically identical puppies. She later admitted they couldn't replace what she lost, but they preserved something familiar. Endings were resisted. Letting go felt unbearable. Inside the marriage, stability became the priority. Conflict wasn't explosive. It was managed and delayed. James spoke about stepping away during arguments, taking walks, cooling down. Barbra emphasized deep listening. These habits looked healthy, but they also avoided rupture. Their home became the center of everything. Work, rest, conversation, even creativity happened side by side, often from bed. James later called their mattress the most important investment they'd ever made, not jokingly, but because so much of their life unfolded there. From the outside, it looked calm, even enviable. But to those who had watched Barbra for decades, something felt off. The woman who once filled arenas now seemed to be shrinking her world to a single room, a single person, a single rhythm. When stability started to look like control. As the years passed, Barbra Streisand and James Brolin's marriage entered a phase that puzzled even longtime observers. On the surface, nothing seemed wrong. They were still together with no public betrayals or dramatic collapses. Yet whispers began to circulate, not about scandal, but about something harder to name. The word that kept resurfacing was strange. In 2018, several reports claimed the couple was nearing a breakup, citing frequent bickering, disputes over home renovations, and frustration with what insiders called their erratic lifestyle. For a marriage built on insulation and control, the speculation felt intrusive. Barbra shut it down immediately. Her representatives denied everything, and she mocked the rumors publicly, joking about strangers congratulating her on getting back together with her own husband. The humor deflected attention, but deeper questions remained unanswered. Beneath the denials, certain facts stood firm. Unlike most Hollywood couples, they kept their finances completely separate. James explained that shared money had damaged his previous marriages, so he refused to repeat the pattern. Separate accounts, separate financial identities, no overlap. Practical to some, transactional to others, it revealed how carefully compartmentalized their marriage truly was. Therapy played a similar role. James spoke of counseling as a preventive tool, a neutral referee available before conflicts escalated. Barbra agreed. For someone who had spent a lifetime managing environments and narratives, therapy offered structure and containment. But it also suggested that this calm required constant upkeep. Another fault line emerged in public perception. Over time, James was casually labeled Mr. Barbra Streisand. He laughed it off. Barbra did not. To her, the nickname echoed the imbalance that had haunted her first marriage. When the label surfaced during work at their home, she reportedly cut ties with the company involved. Language mattered, identity mattered, control over perception mattered. This difference revealed the core dynamic. The marriage worked because James was willing to step back, soften, and accommodate. He didn't compete or resist her gravitational pull. That was exactly what Barbra needed, but it also meant the balance of power was never fully equal. The lingering question was unavoidable. Was this a partnership built on shared freedom or on carefully managed coexistence? As they aged together, their rituals intensified, listening, walking away, avoiding confrontation, sharing space without rupture. These habits preserved peace, but they also prevented anything from being fully tested. Nothing exploded, nothing broke, yet nothing was pushed to its limit either. When weird became the reason it lasted, nearly 3 decades after their awkward blind date, Barbra Streisand and James Brolin remain together in a way that quietly defies expectation. Their marriage is not loud, glamorous, or aspirational in the Hollywood sense. Instead, it has settled into something far quieter and unmistakably strange. James has described their shared bed as the literal center of their life. He has said their best investment was their mattress, because that is where much of their relationship unfolds. They work, read, make calls, rest, and talk side by side, lying parallel rather than facing each other across a room. It is not romance as spectacle, it is intimacy as routine, comforting to some, claustrophobic to others. When conflict arises, they don't fight to win. They step away, they take walks, they breathe. Barbra has echoed the same philosophy for years. Listen carefully, hear the other person, agree to disagree. There is no urgency for resolution, only preservation. What stands out most is what's absent. There is no language of passion, obsession, or destiny. After a lifetime of intensity, Barbra appears to have chosen stability over excitement, predictability over risk, containment over chaos. This marriage does not expand outward. It folds inward. They don't merge finances. They don't blur identities. They don't invite the world in. Even the moment that inspired one of the most famous romantic songs in history came from a private exchange in bed, a man not wanting to fall asleep because he didn't want to miss his wife. That detail reveals the truth beneath the strangeness. This is not a marriage built on performance. It is built on protection against loss, exposure, and emotional volatility. After decades of being watched and consumed, Barbra Streisand did not choose a love that burns. She chose a love that holds. So what do you think? Has Barbra Streisand finally found a mature, evolved version of love, or has her marriage simply become a carefully sealed emotional shelter? Is this kind of relationship something to admire, or something that would feel suffocating to you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if you found this story revealing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden realities behind Hollywood's most unexpected relationships.